Welcome back. Before we congratulate and crown a number of our champions from 2016, we have a very special guest with us tonight. I mentioned him at the commencement of things. He's moved into a new phase of life, a new chapter of life now. It's one that he welcomes, but we want to pause for a moment and celebrate what has been a tremendous career, both here in Australia and internationally. When you look at what he did in NASCAR, without doubt, the most successful Australian ever to conquer in that enormously difficult sport. And locally here, what he did in a relatively short space of time in the supercars scene was phenomenal. 147 championship starts, 28 race wins. He had a win rate of 19%. Think about that for a moment. One of every 5 races he launched into, he was the man. 18 poles, 30 podiums at a time when podiums only counted for the round, not for each race win. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome Marcus Ambrose. It is good to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Very much, yeah.
Welcome. What does life entail now? From what I understand, you've got a lodge, and trout fishing is a thing for you now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Racing's been fantastic for me, and I've had a great career. But it's time to change gears a little bit. You know, I've been competitive and on the road pretty much since '96, and you know, the decision to stop came pretty fast, but it was pretty clear. And so, changing gears for me, slowing it down, raising my family back in Tasmania, going back to my roots a little bit is fantastic. And I just wanted to keep busy, to be honest with you. You know, when you step out of the driver's seat, it leaves a big gap in your life. And so I just wanted to make sure I stayed really busy over the last couple of years. And so I built a wilderness lodge in the centre of Tasmania. It's a great spot called Thousand Lakes Lodge, and we're launching it officially on February 27. Been operating since October, so really thrilled with that. Just something new, something different. I love getting back to basics and walking in the backcountry and trout fishing and all that kind of stuff really sort of appeals to me now. I'm over the hill at 40, so yeah, enjoying my time.
You are not over the hill, far from it.
Well, compared to Colin Bond, I'm not over the hill, am I? But you know.
So you're really, I mean, that's really getting out there, isn't it? Like no mobile phones. You're right out in the wilderness, aren't you?
There's no. I mean, it's never been settled on, so it's just wild country. Tasmania's got a lot of it on the west coast and in the centre, and so it's just great to get out there and get amongst it and just sort of get back to basics. But tonight's about racing, and just congratulations to all the recipients of these awards, both from the competition side and also just you know, the servicing of motorsport, the volunteers and the officials, you know, and CAMS themselves. Just a great confederation to allow me to have grown up through motorsport. I was racing from 10, and it's just been a great life for me. And we are a family. This is a giant family. We all work independently, but you know, we all share each other's hard work.
It is hard in the window of time that we've got here to cover everything in a stellar career for you, but I want to try and treat this a little bit like a timeline to begin with. You talked about the early years, and you did venture to Europe for a time, didn't you? You did chase that dream, but you said to me once that you didn't feel like the open wheelers were really your thing, did you? They didn't sort of fully gel.
Yeah, look, I just love racing, first of all, and like any driver growing up in Australia today, Formula One feels like the pinnacle. And I was certainly no different. And my dad had been over in Europe in the early 70s. He actually started Van Diemen Motor Company with Ralph Furman. And so there was some history, some lineage, I guess, from European days. And so I twisted my dad's arm to get me in a race car, and we bought a Formula Ford, and we did the Australian Championship for a couple of years. That then, you know, leapfrogged me to Europe. And I like to say I ran out of money, talent, or time. I couldn't work out which one came first. But you know, with Formula One, you're on a trajectory to try to get somewhere. And I realised that, you know, it wasn't for me, and maybe the cars didn't quite suit me. I was fortunate then to switch back into Australian racing and sign up with the Stone Brothers. And that was just really the start of my professional career. It's the first time I ever got a paycheck. And when I realised that, you know, my driving was better suited to overpowered, under-tired race cars, that's where I said, righto, you know, I want to feel the car move underneath me. These cars that are too stuck to the ground. And it's a bit of a modern V8 supercar. I really struggled when I came back to V8s a couple of years ago, just because the cars are very technical and they really don't move around like the old V8 supercars that I'd grown up with. So I like overpowered, over heavy, under-tired cars. That's where I go best in.
Let's talk a little bit about the Stone Brothers chapter, because, I mean, that was phenomenal. You came back, as you say. I spoke to Ross in the lead up to this interview, and we talked about, you know, the decision to hire you and things like that, and they paid very close attention to you when you went and did the Honda Young Guns at the turn of the century. And they saw you at a test at Queensland Raceway, and he said all these kids were sort of not really paying too much attention. They were just excited about being a part of it, but here were you doing tyre pressures and taking it really seriously. And
yeah, that's right. I got a couple of really good stories here. First of all, it was the year 2000, and I knew that Europe was not for me. I was trying to just scrape my way through European F3. I'd done a deal with a French team that, you know, it ended badly, so we stopped short there. And then I did 5 races for Alan Docking, a great Australian who, you know, was running Earl's spares on the side of his race team. And I think the spare parts were really the bread and butter for him by the time I'd got there. But Mark Webber had been through, a lot of Australians had been given a shot by him, and he gave me an opportunity to do the last 5 races on a loan. So all of a sudden I just wanted to finish Europe, you know, the right way, leaving on my own terms. So I took this deal on, and the promise was that if I make a career out of motorsport, I'll pay him back straight away. If I don't make it in motorsport, then we'll forget about it. And so when I came home to Australia, that was straight after that deal with Docking. So my eyes were on the prize. And for any junior coming through the ranks now, that whole season through 2000, I was emailing, back when emails were like really cool and new, Ross Stone and Larry Perkins and Mark Larkham, just letting them know, hey, you know, who I am and that I'm thinking about coming home, and asking for advice, genuine advice. You've got to be genuine in all things you do. And so by the time I got back to the Young Guns, I realised, you know, it was October. A lot of the deals had already been set, but I was coming home to try to, you know, make a career change and come and try and break into what was V8 Supercar. So I left in 97, just when V8 Supercar was really just starting. Like, I remember going to the tent at Sandown where Tony Cochrane did the big speech about how great V8 Supercar was going to be, moving away from ATCC. And I thought, oh, who is this guy? Anyway, within 2 years already, it was becoming the place to go to. And so I knew I wanted to be a V8 driver. I wanted to come home to Australia. And I took that Young Guns race really seriously. Now, Greg Crick was running the show for Honda Young Guns. And we went out to Queensland Raceway for this pre-test day, right? Well, very quickly, I stripped all the gears out of it. You know, I was just trying to drive it too hard. And I realised, hey, these gearboxes are going to be a real problem. So I started to squeal and managed to get Cricky to give me a new gearbox for the race weekend. And by Sunday, half the field had no second gear left. So that was the first big win for me. The second one was front-wheel drive. I'd learned in Europe, running around with the driving schools, that, you know, whenever you get a front-wheel drive car, they never turn. And so I just put about 70 pounds of rear tyre pressure in the Honda and about 15 in the front, so it turned so well. And that's the only way I managed to make a career in V8s with those two things. One, I had a gearbox that I pinched off Greg Crick, and 2, I was able to put 70 pounds in the rear tyres.
Ross said that he wanted to ensure that, you know, without being disrespectful, that Europe was out of your system. And once they realised that that was the case, and you jumped in their car, he said it was just immediate. You just gelled.
Yeah, it's just an amazing family, the Stone Brothers. And, you know, I look back, my career was built on those two. Really savvy they are. I mean, Jimmy's just an incredible engineer, does it all by the seat of his pants. He'll go and build a part, and then he'll go to the engineering room and tell them to go draw it up. That's the new part that we're going to race. After he's made it. And then Ross Stone, you know, he'll have the appearance of just being, you know, a battler, but he's very savvy, a real deal maker, and he made that whole thing happen. And we basically went into Stone Brothers Workshop on Monday morning at 6:30, maybe 6:15 on the Monday after Indy, to cut the deal before all the team had come to work. So by 7 o'clock, they'd already kicked me out, and we had a handshake arrangement for the following season. That's how they operate. And just an amazing family, amazing team. And my success was not me. I was just the right guy at the right time. To be lucky enough to drive that car.
You underrate the contribution you made there. Talk about Russell Ingall, getting to know your new teammate. He's been a real character of our sport, I know, but you have a good story about the initial meeting with him, don't you?
Yeah, my first real teammate, like in the professional ranks, because at Stone Brothers, I remember I got the first cheque, I think it was around February. I'm like, wow, look at this, you know, I've actually got a cheque to put in the bank for driving a race car. And my teammate at that time was David Bernard. Well, he pretty much just self-exploded. over the course of the 2 years. Had a really tough time to adapt to professional ranks. He was a fantastic junior driver, but couldn't quite handle the pressures and responsibilities of going pro. And so Russell then came on board to replace David, and he was pretty savvy by that stage. He'd done that whole stint in Europe. He'd put up with Larry for about 7 or 8 years. So, he knew exactly what he was doing. And we signed up, and the first chance he got me full of beer down here in Melbourne on a PR gig, and was just peppering me for information, trying to find out how much I was getting paid and who was good in the team, who wasn't, And that was when I really realised, hey, it's every man for himself here. You got to have your teammate as a friend, but you're also competing. And he was very much a competitor, and that's why we're good mates today. He's such a fantastic competitor, and just a real, he's just it's like a dogfight whenever you're around Russell as a teammate. And that's when I went to America. The same thing was applied. Like all those teammates and friends, you've got to keep them close, but not too close. You just got to not let them get to you.
Outwardly, you might seem like different human beings, but you actually have a very similar kind of tenacity to him, a real sort of fighter approach, don't you?
Yeah, well, I come from Tasmania, so I've had to fight my whole life, Yeah, and, we hear about, friends and rivals and racing and rivals. Well, I've had plenty of rivals. Some of them are teammates, some of them are competitors, and some of them are yourself, your own demons too, right? So, it's great. Great to learn racing at the pro level in Australia. And at that stage, Australian racing was pretty raw, pretty rugged. You had a lot of biffo going on at the time. Tony Longhurst was trying to punch Paul Morris with the helmet back in the day, and Scaife was shaking his fist at
Russell.
At Eastern Creek. There was just a lot of action going on. Me and Greg Murphy, there was a lot going on. Yeah.
So that's a flashpoint. Let's talk about that now. Before we get your impressions on it, because Australians in sport always remember major points in a rivalry, and this for you and Murph, 2005 at Bathurst, was the one.
They got vision of it, can you believe it?
Here we go.
For whatever reason, in the early phase of these restarts, the HRT car is not quite comfortable in its... Ambrose has had a massive shunt. So Greg Murphy's involved. More cars, the track is jammed.
Can you believe that? That was huge. And watch this. Look at these guys.
It's on.
Murphy and Ambrose. These two do not like each other, and they are going to have some serious words. Look at this. They are two heated men. They are two heated competitors. Can you believe this Super Cheap Auto 1000?
You were glued to that just then. Do you still bristle about this one?
Yeah, it doesn't sit easy, that's for sure. I learnt to fight in America too, so, we had our time again. It might be a bit different, but that was a simmering year. It wasn't just that moment that was being shown in that clip. It was the whole build-up to that moment. There was a lot of rivalry between, Greg and myself, and even just Holden versus Ford, really. There was a real momentum about, Holden had been dominating V8 supercars for a long time. I came in and was able to win a championship or two with Fords, and there was this turning point, right? And there was a lot of friction, and there was a lot at stake. Back then, it was just incredible, the passion that the drivers and the teams, it was pretty raw, like I said earlier. It wasn't as refined as what the product we call V8 supercar today. And so, there was just a lot of emotion at that time, and there was building up over the course of the year. I had a lot of penalties. The Bathurst 1000 was a balaclava issue as well, where we had 2 penalties we had to stop because I wasn't wearing a balaclava, and then my teammate Warren Luff wasn't wearing a balaclava. The protests were put in from somewhere to work it all out, So there was just a lot going on. And then that incident itself, I was charging back through the field because I was coming back through the pack from the penalties, and Greg missed a shift. So I didn't want to pass him where I did into the cutting. Not many people really want to do that. But he missed a shift off a turn 2, and I had a lot of momentum on him, so I just sort of took those opportunistic, spur of the second decisions you make. Next thing you know, we're in the fence and the race is over. The championship was over really at that point too. So just a lot bubbled to the surface in that one moment. I did hold my composure a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have let it rip.
You raise a good point there, because mathematically you're absolutely in the game, and it was the one that potentially the third title, potentially and a Bathurst that got away. But you'd already that year, my buddy Lee Diffie had cornered you at the Grand Prix. Maybe only 2 or 3 people at the time knew that you were going to make a switch to NASCAR. Tell us about the rhyme and reason behind that.
Yeah, look, I guess I've always just made decisions not based on being sensible, just gut instinct. It's made my career, and it's probably ended my career too, probably earlier than it could have. But I decided that I'd come as far as I could in V8s and in Australian racing. It'd been a great run, and it was getting a little testy between Russell and Ross and me and Jimmy. It was just success was starting to take its toll, and the sport too was sort of in a period of change, and so I thought, well, if I'm going to, I still viewed myself as an international driver. I think that's really what it boils down to. And I'd just gotten married to my wife Sonia at the time. It's like, well, if I'm ever going to go overseas again, it's got to be right now. I can always switch back if it fails and come back to V8 Supercar. And so that's the way I thought about it. So I thought I'll just go to America and have a look. And so on the honeymoon, off we went to the Daytona 24-hour. So I must have chosen my wife well, because she's still with me today. And we went to a very cold and windy and desolate Daytona 500 with Paul Morris, actually. And we did a race there, and I got to know in a few seasons earlier the Ford Racing management from the States. And I bumped into them at the 24-hour, and they said, "Hey, Ambrose, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I want to come to America, and I don't know how. I just thought the sports cars would be my entry into it." He said, "Oh, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just do NASCAR?" NASCAR? What's NASCAR? So anyway, so the deal was struck then. Right, I'll come over and have a go. There was no deal. It was just like, if you come to America, we'll try and help you where we can. So over the course of that season, that was 2005, during the V8 season, I would duck over to the States. About 5 or 6 trips I did that year, just trying to create a network and meet people and so forth. And luckily I got in with Tad Geschecter, who had some Ford money, and a young fellow called Bobby East, the Beast from the East was his nickname. He was a big USAC guy, sort of midget, asphalt, dirt guy. His father actually built frames called the Beast frame. It's still a very successful company. The two of us became Ford development drivers with Tad Geschecter's money, and we ran the whole truck season. That was 2006. That's what got me going. When I look back at it now, very, very lucky. The timing was perfect for me. NASCAR had a big drive for diversity, not just drivers from Mexico and Canada, but sort of anywhere. And so the timing was right. And really only 2 people made it through that whole process. It was myself and one, Pablo Montoya, that managed to make it to Sprint Cup and last more than a few races. And I think we're the only 2 international drivers that have ever made it more than a few races in NASCAR. Certainly the only internationals that have made a season. I think Fittipaldi might have done half a season or so before he got fired. But an amazing transformation. Very, very lucky. Good timing for me. But again, just seat of the pants, just jumped in and just thought, it looks easy, we'll turn left. And the first day I got into a serious stock car, Robert Presley, he was a cup driver for some time and then had stepped down to Nationwide, and he was my driver coach. And he was on the radio to me. He says, "Oh, you're just getting better and betterer." I'm like, wow, I'm in for a culture shock here if he's my driver coach. And when I first jumped in the car, I went out flat out, and it was only a 32-second lap around Kentucky Speedway. And it turns out Kentucky's a medium bank track, not a high bank track, pretty flat. I thought it was seriously banked, like death-defying steep. And I was about 3.5 seconds slow. And they came in, they said, "How'd it feel?" I said, "I felt really good, what are my lap times?" And they told me lap times. They said, "Is there something wrong?" I said, "Oh, no, I was just feeling it out. I'll go back out again and have another go." And I took 1.5 inches out of my harness device, both sides, because I just thought, wow, if I'm going to stick it in here, I'm going to stick it in big, because I had no idea what I was doing. Thankfully got through the test in one piece, got the times dialed in that second run, at least close enough to give them some confidence that they could keep testing for the rest of the day. And typical NASCAR fashion, they took me to 3 states, 3 tracks in 3 days to see if I had what I needed. And they took me to a short track, a medium track and a big track. And I came home and signed the deal and went across the states.
Was there a moment in all of it, Sonia's here tonight, big risk in all that. Was there a moment you thought, you've gone from the dizzy heights of winning 2 Supercars championship locally. Did you think, have I bitten off more than I could chew?
Yeah.
Or was it clicked? Did it click?
No, I wrecked, I totally destroyed 4 cars in 5 weeks. Yeah, and I'm like, wow, I'm just waiting for this phone call. This phone call was about to strike. But thankfully, I'd qualified in one race really well, shown great speed in another. So there were these little tiny snippets of of something that they sort of hung on to. And in NASCAR, they're great, because NASCAR have a lot of drivers, a lot of cars, a lot of races. And Robbie Loomis, who was once a crew chief for Jeff Gordon, who was running RPM at the time when I met him, he said, look, we give all our drivers, he said, the chance to prove they can't, right? So they need time to prove you can't do it before we will fire you, And I thought that was a really good approach, that they'll give you a bit of time. They won't fire you the first week, but, after 4 crashed cars in 5 weeks, it was all unlucky stuff too. Mike Skinner blew a right front at St. Louis and just pinned me in the wall and gave me a concussion. And then the next week, I spun out. I was in the front row at Charlotte, didn't know what I was doing with these new super hard tyres, and wrecked a car, and it just kind of manifested. And then all of a sudden, I had 3 or 4 more races, and the sun started to shine, and I never looked back.
The record books would show at Homestead 2014, when it finished, the NASCAR chapter, 2 wins at the very pinnacle, 46 top 10s, 3 poles. I mean, it's just phenomenal for an Aussie to achieve that. But you worked very hard, mate, at trying to ensure that you garnered the respect of these guys. That was a big part of your mission, wasn't it?
Oh, it really was, and I tried to really blend into America. The American racing culture is very, very different, and you can't go in there and say, well, I'm from Australia and I'm going to do it this way. You won't last 5 seconds. So I tried to really sort of just, blend in and adapt what I had, and it took a lot of adapting. And over the course of the 10 years, my driving style had been butchered to suit oval track racing and these big, heavy stock cars. They're 900 horsepower, and they a clunky old 4-speed gearbox, everything's steel in them. They're a terrible car. You'd never build them today the way they build them, but it's just the rules, and they want to put on a show, and they put on a great show because the cars don't handle it all. And they got way too much power and not enough brakes. Like you'd lose, at Watkins Glen, you'd lose 2 seconds a lap under brakes on the 3rd lap. They just don't stop. Yeah, so, and that's in 2014 they're doing that, It's just the way they are, because they got steel rims and undersized brakes, and that's just the way they like it. So you can't fight that. You can't fight City Hall. Just blend in and do the best you can in your surroundings. I never made it to a premium team. There's a clear hierarchy in teams in all facets of motorsport. Mm-hmm. NASCAR is no exception. I'm really proud to have driven for Richard Petty, the King, and to have been, part of his family in the racing circles, and be part of what NASCAR was. Won a few races, lost a few that I probably should have won, woulda, coulda. But in general, mate, really pleased that I did it, and it's been great for me, and I learned a lot, saw a lot, and I'm really pleased that I went over there and gave it a go.
Time's going to beat us here, but you should be proud, mate, on behalf of everyone in the room. Would you please put your hands together? I mean, it's just
Thank you,
phenomenal. A couple of quick questions to end. You talked about the volume of races during the year. I mean, by the time you do some testing and other events here and there, I mean, it's 50 plus things that you're doing during the year. Did it take its toll?
Yeah, it certainly did, and that's part of the burnout was certainly there, and that's why when I came back to Australia, I realised that I wasn't the right person to lead Dick Johnson, Team Penske on. And so, I've paid my price in racing, and, 40 races a year plus all the other show events you do throughout the season. You supersize a normal career in one season pretty much over there. And so that's just a fact of life. A lot of drivers do burn out. Carl Edwards just announced his retirement about a month ago. Similar circumstances to me, probably just decided the time was right to stop. Want to be in control of your destiny at the end, But, racing's been fantastic to me. I love racing. It's still in my blood. Just because I'm not driving on the pro ranks doesn't mean that I don't stay engaged with racing and love it with a passion like everyone in this room does.
I'm not a believer in regrets in life. That's a personal thing. I know you probably have maybe a different view on the return and DJR, Team Penske. Why in your mind didn't it perhaps click? Lots of things had changed. You'd been away racing a completely different car for a decade, and the cars here were different when you came back too, weren't they? Yeah,
look, sure, it's an elephant in the room. Why did you come back after a successful NASCAR career and stop in V8s after 2 races when, I wasn't winning? When I came back to V8 Supercar, I was struggling. And I think that's the reason, because, my time was up. And the deal with Roger and Team Penske and Dick, it was really formulated a year and a half beforehand, where a conversation occurs. You say, oh, if you ever did that, Roger, yeah, I'd love to drive for you. And you kind of leave it at that, and then, a year and a half later, the phone call comes and it's on. It's like, oh, shit, Is this really what I should be doing now? Because I'm feeling pretty tired and worn out from my American thing. And I thought, oh, it'll be right. I'll come home and, it'll work itself out. And then, the situation that DJR was in at the time where they were in this transition phase, and they still are. They're getting better and better each race. You can see their progression, but it just takes time. I knew it. So when you come back, and I'm struggling to adapt from NASCAR back into a modern V8, the testing restrictions and the tyres are hard, and I'm kind of confused, and I'm tired from the States, and then you see, of course, to get out of this, it's going to take 3 years to dig yourself out of this hole. And I just realised that I'm not the right person for that team in the phase that they're in. I need to get out of the way, and that's what I did. And there's no regrets there. I'm really happy with the choice. It's just unfortunate, that I let people down. That's really what sort of bugs me today. But you've got to be a bigger man really to know when you've got to make those hard decisions, and the hard decision was made, and it was pretty simple.
I think you're to be credited with the way, on that basis, the way that you handle it. Final question then. Do you see yourself as dabbling in a little bit of racing? Will you do any more racing of any kind?
Yeah, I've got a lot to give. I've seen a lot of racing from a competitor's side, from a marketing perspective, from a safety perspective, from an event management perspective. I've seen a lot. I've been around the world, raced a lot of different categories, so I'd love to play a role in motorsport to some degree, but my days of professional driving are done. Socially, though, I might turn up and race a lawnmower or race a dirt speedway car, or those little off-road buggies look pretty good, I've got to tell you. Yeah. So who knows where life will take you, but racing's, once it's in your blood, it's in there for good. And when I see guys like JB still going at it, still winning races, that's a lot to be committed to as well, just for the pure enjoyment of it. And that's really what racing's meant to be about. You got to love it. And I certainly still have that love for the sport.
We're over time here. I actually wanted to show some highlights of your career, but I just think in the discussion, I hope we've covered that off for everybody. Mate, it is phenomenal that you've come here tonight to share that with the audience. Congrats on a stellar career, on everything that you've achieved, and thank you for sharing with the audience here tonight. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. And what I will say is that, I'm no better than anyone else. I just got lucky along the way.
Rubbish.
And guys like, Shane, who's going to win his award tonight, incredible talent. And back when Colin Bond was winning races before there was TV. Brilliant talent. And Richard Petty, said to me, the fight that I had with my NASCAR in 1965, 66, whenever he was racing, it's the same fight you have today. The car will never turn on an oval like it should, and the tyres always burn out. Nothing changes. And it's as hard yesterday as it is tomorrow, and it was in 1960. Racing won't change. The competition won't change. It's still a pure form. Motorsport is in its purest form is just that. It's just man versus machine, and the fights are always the same. And my fights are going to be, that I had, rivalries on the track and the car, battles that you have behind the wheel. It's going to be the same in 20, 30 years' time. It's just a great sport. Love it, and just pleased that I could add some fun and character to Australian racing while I was here, and to have enjoyed the sport and come out with both my arms and legs intact.
Well done on what you did here and everything you did in NASCAR. Good luck with the next chapter. Thank you. Marcus Ambrose, everyone.
Thank you, guys.